Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us in this fall morning. Summer is officially over. So I'm Nama Blonder. I'm an architect and urban planner with Smart Density, and you probably wonder where Lirad is. Lirad is not with us today, but he will be on our next episode next week. And today I am so excited to have Matthew Slutsky with us from BuzzBuzzHome. Matthew is the co-president and co-founder of BuzzBuzzHome, and BuzzBuzzHome, for those of you who don't know or not familiar with, creates a listing of all new residential developments across North America. It's pretty cool. But to be honest, I didn't even tell that to Matthew, but when I started my business the first week, that's when I met Matthew, and I thought that he should be a cool person to ask some questions about business. So 3 years later, exactly, I'm getting that chance. And for those of you who are not familiar with how we build this, the webinar series we are doing is exactly that, is to get a chance to talk to the leaders of our real estate industry here in Toronto and get a chance to ask them the questions we usually don't get a chance to ask, not in school and not working for other companies. So with that, Matthew, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you?
On the show.
Wonderful. So as I said, now 3 years later, I'm getting a chance to ask you all the questions I want to ask you. So tell us how you started, when you started, and what was the initial idea that came in mind?
Yeah, so we started BuzzBuzzHome about 10 to 12 years ago now, maybe 11 years, somewhere around there. Prior to starting BuzzBuzzHome, I was VP of development for a condo builder in the city, Diamante. So I worked really closely with, worked for Julie DiLorenzo, and still a very good friend and mentor of mine. And I think when she originally hired me, I'd already been in the industry. She knew that I always had a passion to start my own company, so it wasn't a surprise to her. And while working for Diamante, we launched a bunch of projects, and the amount that we were spending on advertising was pretty outrageous. At the time, I think a Toronto Star full page ad was like $42,000 per page. I think a Globe and Mail ad was somewhere around $25,000 a page. Yet builders were not spending anything on their websites. I mean, this is only 12 years ago, but builders still had really terrible websites, Flash-based. They weren't really searchable. I see Gordon using the Q&A. Hey, Gordon. And I just thought, I saw this shift happening in the market where people were starting to use online a lot more. They were starting to use kind of what was kind of defined as Web 2.0, much more interactive. And purchasers felt entitled to information online. And builders were the exact opposite of that. Builders were like, I'm not sharing anything online. Here's my logo. If you want to find information, come to the sales center. And they had a very rigid sale. It was a good sales regime at the time. A purchaser would come in, they tell them what they're interested in. The sales agent would be a really good agent and figure out like the two best plans, and they'd only show them the two best plans for them. At the time that worked well, but the internet opened everything up and really made it so information was available to people. So I started to get this feeling that people felt entitled to information. They wanted more, and they wanted way more than what builders were showing them online. They also didn't only want to see what was being advertised. They wanted to see everything available. If you're building a condo here, and in 2 months from now, there's going to be a condo launching next door, they wanted to know that, not only if they were advertising. So I left Diamante with the idea to create what's become BuzzBuzzHome. I partnered with a longtime friend of mine, Cliff Peskin, who's been an incredible co-founder and co-president of mine. And we essentially launched what's become BuzzBuzzHome. We launched in downtown Toronto first, and then we went into the suburbs. And then I mentioned Gord a second ago. Gord called me up out of the blue. I no idea who he was. He was like, "Listen, my name's Gord. I'm a salesperson. I love what you're doing. I see what you're doing. I need to be involved. I need to be involved. I'm in Vancouver. You have to jump on a plane, come to Vancouver, and start up a Vancouver office." so I took him up on that offer. I was like, great. And we started our Vancouver office and grew out Vancouver, then kind of filled in the rest of Canada, and then started expansion into the US. So
okay,
that's
wait.
over.
Yeah.
Over
Okay, webinar is done. Okay, wait. Let's talk about, so you started with Toronto. What is the time difference between the Toronto office and Vancouver?
I want to say maybe 2 years.
Okay.
Yeah, we started filling in Canada pretty rapidly.
Okay, yeah. So, okay, you left your job. How do you pay the bills?
So I saved enough money to be able to, Cliff and I, one of the really interesting things about BuzzBuzzHome, and we can get into this in more detail later on, I'm sure, is that we've never taken really outside funding. In the first year, we had friends and family around, but we never did VC funding. So I had a little bit of money saved up. Cliff was in the middle of exiting a different company. We both put in a small amount of money, and I had enough kind of left over to be able to sustain myself for a little bit. And the idea was that when you start a company like this, it's very naive. I thought, okay, like we can have 3 employees, and we can be across North America, and we could be making billions of dollars. It obviously didn't happen that way, and we have a lot more staff, and we're not making billions of dollars. But yeah, I mean, it was really tough. It was, it cost a lot of money, and Cliff and I really I don't think we took salaries for the first 2 years, so I had to have a nice size reserve to be able to fund myself through that time. And we started taking a salary probably like end of year 2, beginning of year 3, and it was a very small salary, probably until probably our 5th year, we were both taking like under what the poverty line is. So really had to rely on savings from previous jobs to be able to get us through, and lines of credit and bank cards.
How long did it take you to find your first client? And was there enough time in the first reserve? I don't know how many months you planned ahead of having no income from the business, but were you able to find your first client in that period of time?
Yeah, so I mean, BuzzBuzzHome was really a hit off the bat. Because there was nobody else doing this. Like when we launched, in the first year we launched, our website was awful. The experience wasn't so good. It was a glitchy website, but our quality of information was really good. So we immediately had people using our site, and we immediately had people contacting builders to request more information. So our site proved itself to work right off the bat. So we were able to bring on customers in the first, right after we launched, we were able to bring on customers. So we were able to fund ourselves with revenue pretty quickly. I'd say within.
Let's wait a minute, because we all know that magic doesn't happen. You don't put on a website and all of a sudden you have clients reaching out to you from a website. That doesn't happen. How did you really find your first customers? How did you do it? Did you knock on doors? Did you do call phones? What?
Our first client ever was Sam Crignano from Citizen. We're still very close with them. Sam was our first client ever. Very forward thinking. If you don't know who he is or Citizen, he did the Marilyn Monroe buildings
in Mississauga, yeah.
Mississauga, L Tower in Toronto. He's got a great vision. So early on, we had a web analytics tool that told us, and we still, right now we use Google Analytics and tells us how many people on our site. We were using a different program back then in addition to Google Analytics called Woopra. And not only did Woopra tell us how many people were on the site, but it told us kind of who their internet provider was, or I don't even remember what it was, but I was online and I could see there was like 10 people on BuzzBuzzHome at the time. Again, this was early on. We weren't getting huge amounts of traffic, but I saw that one of the people on BuzzBuzzHome was coming from Citizen Developments. And I got so excited. So I quickly looked up Citizen Developments I looked up who the founders were. And I thought, right when I saw him leave BuzzBuzzHome, I sent him an email and called. And I said, hey, can I please speak to the owner, Sam? And I got through. I said, I'm calling from BuzzBuzzHome. I don't know if you've heard of us. And of course, he was like, I was actually just on your website. And I think kind of that experience was like, and I was obviously very passionate about what we were doing. And he really liked what he saw because he was just on the site. And at the time, we were charging like $500 a month. It's again, builders at the time were coming from spending $42,000 a week on the Star, $25,000 a week on Globe and Mail, and those are just 2 papers. So I was like, try this out for $500 for an entire month and see what happens. And he's been a client with us ever since. I mean, he's always has projects featured. He saw results right away. And the great thing about the real estate industry is, especially the new construction industry, is once a builder tries something and other people get wind of it, it's like a snowball effect. So I'm not saying that it was like Sam came on and all of a sudden we had hundreds of clients, but Sam came on, that gave us some more credibility. He introduced us to some other builders. Word started to get out. At the same time, the way BuzzBuzzHome works is people come on our site, they find out what projects they're interested in, they email the builders. So at the same time, builders were already, sales companies were already starting to get email requests coming from BuzzBuzzHome. So we started to kind of work up a little bit of a word of mouth campaign that was really successful in landing clients. One funny side story is I remember, I'll never forget the first time we landed Sam as a client. He called us up. He said, Matt, I've got a check for you. And Cliff and I were like, amazing. So Cliff and I decided, I said, Sam, don't put it in the mail. We're going to come down. And I wanted to meet Sam. So we got in the car. We went down to his office. We met him. We took the check. We were so excited. We were like, hey, let's chat for like half an hour. We had some coffee. And then we went to the bank to deposit it. We got to the bank and we realized we left the check in his office. So we had to go back down and pick up the check. I'll never forget that story. Our first time making money, and we forgot the check.
It was still just the 2 of you at this point?
I think
when did you have your first hire? No,
we had our first hire early on. Like there was a bunch of hires that we had to have. Neither Cliff nor myself are engineers, so we had to have kind of a CTO position early on. We had a few researchers early on.
So basically, this is interesting. You basically build an online platform without even having any understanding of how you build anything online. So
yes and no. I definitely did not have any understanding of it. I understood the real estate world really well. Cliff, my partner, while he's not an engineer, he's a brilliant technology guy who just understands technology, where it's going, how product works. His previous company was actually it was the first company. It's called Nutrition in Motion, and they did kind of South Beach inspired meal deliveries across Ontario and Quebec. And again, we're talking about the early 2000s. He built this back end, and it sounds really easy now, but clients were able to log into his system, would automatically create a kind of a calorie count and decide what food they were able to have in any day. Then all of his clients would kind of submit what they want for the next 2 days. It would break it down into grocery lists for his chefs it was just an amazing system that he built really early on. So he was, while he wasn't an engineer by trade, he knew what needed to get done and had an understanding of how to actually get it built. So I really understood the real estate side, and he really understood how technology works and how to get us to the build out.
Okay. When did you reach a point, and maybe that was the first day, maybe that was the first client, but when did you reach a point when you said, okay, we got something here, this is no more questionable?
Yeah, so I should mention that when I left Diamante, I had 2 ideas. When I left Diamante, it was end of 2008. So, while it was a really short recession, a really short downturn in Canada, it was obviously a longer downturn in the US, I had 2 ideas. One idea is what became BuzzBuzzHome, and another idea was to create a fund to buy distressed property in Florida. And obviously I ended up going the BuzzBuzzHome route instead. I really knew from day one, like I was all in from when I decided to go the BuzzBuzzHome route. as opposed to the distressed property route. And I knew it in my bones. I mean, I was in the industry. I knew that nobody was really doing what we were doing. I saw other players in the U.S. There were companies, you know, Zillow was still pretty young at the time. Trulia. I mean, there were companies in the space, but more centered on resale and eventually rental, and not paying attention to new construction. New construction was like the forgotten piece of the puzzle at the time. And it was an industry that I'd been in it and knew it really well. So I knew that there was something there from the get-go.
Okay, so I'm still at the early days. So you have an employee from almost day one, so you need to pay them salary. Yep. And I'm guessing also an office. That's a lot of debt to owe.
Our CTO was on a smaller salary, but he had equity in the company. Originally we were running out of my condo, so I had a condo at if you I don't know if your viewers are mainly from Toronto, but I had a condo at One City Hall, which is a Diamante building at Bay and Dundas. So we were originally running out of my home office or my condo there. Then we switched to running out of Cliff's house or his apartment. So yeah, we actually, for the first, I want to say the first year, we really were out of Cliff's apartment. So he owned a 3-story building on DuPont. He lived on the main floor. There was a tenant on the second floor and a tenant on the third floor. So we were out of his office, out of his home. And then I want to say year 2.5, his tenant on the second floor moved out. So BuzzBuzzHome rented his second floor from him. And that, I want to say, got us to like probably year 4 or 5. We were running out of that second floor apartment at 88 DuPont.
You said that you build this company, and it's kind of this type of companies get to bring investors. Usually that's how they get built. And you mentioned that you've never had investors, you never had external funding. How did you manage to do that where everyone else needs to like 6 more?
We had friends and family investors early on. So we never went the VC route, but we did have friends and family investors. So in the first year, I mean, it comes down to what you just said. How do you pay these employees? I remember one day, payroll was due the next day. I think we had like 2 to 4 employees at the time, and we didn't have any money. And it was like, so I called up one of my friends and was like, Steve, do you want to invest in BuzzBuzzHome? We gave, at the time we didn't really know what we were doing. He got a great valuation on the company, and he gave us, $10,000, I think. And then another one of our friends did that. So in the first year, we had to sell off some equity in the company to friends and family to really keep us going until, I'd say at the end of year 1, we were able to fully definitely at the end of year 1, we were able to fully finance ourselves.
Are they still partners, or did you buy them out at some point?
No, friends and family are still partners. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
Partners. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, so tell us about that 11 years. That's quite a ride. Tell us about a point when you thought you either not gonna, stand up again, but a true challenge. Not give me something real.
So, I mean, the life of a startup is a crazy roller coaster with like the highest highs and the lowest lows. And we've definitely had some lows along the way. One of our lows was about 1.5 years ago. We had spent a few years kind of secretly building out an incredible platform called Daypack, which is an inventory management system, POS system for builders, dealt with all the contracts, integrated into BuzzBuzzHome, so you can actually do online sales on BuzzBuzzHome. We built it all in-house. We had an incredible team. And then about 1.5 years ago, it was February 2019. Like we were just spending a fortune on it. I think we had a run rate on it of we had a burn rate on it of about, I want to say over $500,000 a year. We probably put in 1.2 to 1.5 million in building it out. and we just had a cash crunch, and we decided kind of on the spot, like, we have to let go of this entire team. We have to shelve this product. It's an incredible product. We have customers using it who are loving it. We definitely know there is something, we know there's a future there, but unless we actually raise money, then we're going to have to shelve this product. And we decided to shelve it. You know, one of the things about not taking funding and being a startup is Cliff and I wear multiple hats. I mean, we're the founders, we're the co-presidents, and we're running the company and pushing it forward. But we also wear day-to-day hats. Like, I'm not only the head of sales, but I actually do sales. Like, I spend a lot of my day actually on sales calls and talking to clients. Cliff, while he's a co-president, he also is the head of product, and he's deep in product. And I mean, he spends most of his day deep in product. So to raise money is really tough. I mean, it would mean that either Cliff or myself would have to take off half a year and do the rounds to VCs. And that would be really tough on the company. And at the time, Cliff was, I think, actually spending 100% of his time on Daypack. So at the time, Cliff was spending 100% of his time on Daypack. So he was full Daypack. I was full BuzzBuzzHome. I was doing sales. I was doing product. It was just, we spread ourselves way too thin. And we still think there's a great product there. We haven't closed it down. We're just not actively working on it. But there is a huge potential there. So shutting that down was really sad. It was really tough. Again, we were in a cash crunch. It was just a terrible time, and we made it through it, obviously. But it really made us focus on BuzzBuzzHome, which was needed at the time. We spread ourselves too thin, and it let us kind of regroup and put ourselves back into getting BuzzBuzzHome into shape.
Tell us about the US, because we had another guest here who said that Canadians actually have this advantage in the US when they introduce themselves as Canadians, and the Canadian market is large enough, or why should you go to the US? Or at least the other guest, tried and it wasn't successful for him. But that was a good lesson, right? Tell us about expanding to the US from BuzzBuzzHome perspective.
Yeah, so expanding to BuzzBuzzHome is also, I would agree with everything that person said. It is really tough going into the US. We opened up an office in New York. We had, I think, 5 people in New York.
You open an office in New York. That's how you do it? You go to New York, or you rent an office, and you all of a sudden have an office in New York?
So we rented an office in New York. Originally, Cliff was going to New York because he's more on the internal side. I'm more on the external. So he was working on hiring a team. Once we had a team in place there, then I was flying to New York every Wednesday from Toronto. So every Wednesday I'd be at our New York office, meeting with our team, meeting with potential clients. But New York is, at the time, we thought it made the most sense for us to launch in New York. First of all, if you can make it in New York, you can make it anywhere. There's a lot of new development going on in New York. But as you kind of mentioned, we were never like insiders in New York. We were always kind of this other company that had an office in New York. And much like it in Toronto, like, it is a very small community, and it is not an easy community to break into. So here we were in New York. We had hired a bunch of people. I was coming in once a week, so I wasn't able to do the rounds. I mean, my life right now is very different than when we started BuzzBuzzHome. And when we started BuzzBuzzHome, every night I was at a condo launch. Every night I was at a groundbreaking. Every night I was at an event. I don't really do that anymore. I've got 2 little kids, and it's just not possible. But to break into a market like New York, when we were younger, I had to be doing that. What was missing was having a founder full-time in New York that could just really, someone whose real passion and love is the company. You can have incredible employees, but for them to have that real passion and connection is really tough. And there's no doubt that nobody can sell product like a founder can sell product. So we expanded into New York. We're now in 15 markets in the US. New York is a really strong market. We've got incredible traffic there. LA is a great market. DC is a great market. But we don't have the same level of kind of household name, our quality of data is excellent, but it's not where our headquarters is. So it's really tough to break into new markets. And it's, I think, the type of thing that, we'll never stop it. Like, we'll just continue to push on in the US. I would have liked it to be a lot faster growth in the US, but it's not. It's slower growth, but we're fine with that. Because we know that, you asked why go to the US. Well, US is 10 times the size of Canada. I mean, it's just a huge market that is literally, again, I used to fly to New York every week, every Wednesday for the day. I'd fly in on the the Porter 6 a.m. flight, and I'd fly out at the 8 p.m. flight. It was tiring, but it was a very doable.
Why did you choose New York as the first city to expand to? I would guess New York is not an easy city, and real estate is hyper local, and no one is sitting there waiting for Matthew Slutsky to come down to New York.
We had, before we even launched our office there, we had already started building data there. So we already had traffic in New York. But there's no doubt that having our headquarters in Toronto and New York being a 40-minute flight makes it really attractive. Again, it's not like LA where I'd only be able to go once a quarter or something. It was like literally every week I was able to fly in. So we knew there was a lot of development happening. We knew it was close. We knew that we were already building traffic. So it made sense to us. In retrospect, maybe I would have picked a different city, like a smaller city to target, or maybe it would have gone right to LA. But it was a decision we made, and again, we've got great traffic there now, and we do have clients there. So maybe it was the right decision.
I guess we have time for 3 more questions. So tell me about the greatest success, but as a story, not as an 11-year story.
Yeah. I mean, I've kind of already told it. The greatest success to me was getting that first check. I mean, that was
okay. Perfect.
That was. I knew in my heart that we had something and we were onto something. Like I knew that there was a great idea there, but getting that first check, actually having somebody paying us, and not just paying us, but continuing on the next, like actually seeing the value in it. I mean, that was such an incredible day. And it's not much of a story, and I feel bad that I already wasted it up earlier on in the show, but that was just such a great success to me. I mean, it was your first client. There's nothing like it. The first check. It's almost like you realize that you created something. It's almost like printing money. It's like I took something that didn't exist, and I figured out a way to have it make money. It's a great feeling.
I agree with you. What was I wanting? Oh, what's next? Are you gonna pick up what's next?
So I mean, we spend a lot of our time and energy on U.S. expansion. So to us, there's a few things. One is making sure our goal is to create the best new home purchasing experience. And that is our goal. So to do that, we need a few things. One is we need to have the best quality of data available at any time. And 2, we need to have an incredible user interface. So we work really hard on coming up with new methods of acquiring data. How do we actually get this information? I was actually on a podcast earlier in the year, just before COVID, and it was with a U.S. company, and they were, one of the guys was located like in the middle of nowhere, Florida, in a new development. And on the show, he's like, "Let me find out if you have my subdivision in BuzzBuzzHome." And like, not only do we have a subdivision, we have like accurate information on which units were sold in that development. He was kind of like blown away that he was able to find his house. And so having incredible quality of data is really hard. Ensuring that data is up to date is really hard. So it's not as it's not like you're launching a new condo, we add it onto BuzzBuzzHome. Well, once it's added, we need to ensure that the floor plans are kept up to date, pricing is kept up to date. If there's any it's a continual thing that's living on our site. So next is continuing to build out quality of data. The other thing about a website the size of BuzzBuzzHome is just keeping it running is really tough. Like there's always little bugs, and so we're doing a big push right now just on making sure that we're like kind of fixing every little tiny issue that there could be on the site. Because little tiny design changes can have huge impacts on the user experience. So we're really spending time right now on just making sure that everything is running optimally.
Because you're, sorry, did I?
No, that's it.
Okay, because you're a startup or tech company, was there an intersection when you really had to pivot and you were surprised by something and you said, okay, we need to shift? Because it sounds pretty linear. It sounds like the idea and the product you are having now is the same idea and concept you started with. But was there any intersection when something shifted dramatically?
So there were small things along the way, but one of the things that Cliff and I have tried really hard to do is stay completely laser focused on our niche in the industry. I feel like kind of like once a week I have someone call me, be like, what you're doing at BuzzBuzzHome for residential, like no one's really doing it well in the commercial space. Or like, why don't you just add That's not our feeling. Like we don't know, like we try and stay really laser focused because that's what we know really well. And that's kind of allowed us to achieve kind of the lead in everything. And any time that we've tried to deviate a bit off that, it's been detrimental to BuzzBuzzHome, which is our main vehicle. So there's things like Daypack as an example. Now, Daypack was interesting because it would have allowed us feeds from builders to ensure that data is up to date on BuzzBuzzHome. It would have allowed for new home sales on BuzzBuzzHome. So it did meet kind of our objectives, but it was spreading us thin. But we've also done things that we started a marketing firm that we actually ended up shutting down about exactly a year ago. And it was running for many years. But it transitioned out of real estate into its own thing that Cliff and I just couldn't focus on. And without us focusing on the person we had managing it, it just kind of fell apart. It was an incredible company that unfortunately we couldn't keep going. So anytime that we've kind of tried pivoting out of our lane, it's hurt BuzzBuzzHome. So we really work hard on keeping ourselves laser focused on our specific niche.
Why did you call it BuzzBuzzHome?
So originally, the original name was Casaroo, and it was Casa like a house, but with a K, and Roo like a street, but spelled R-O-O, and it's gonna have a kangaroo and a pouch with like a little house. And we went to LA Ads, LA Inc. When we were first launching to do our branding, and I met with Lawrence Aitliff and David Klugsberg, and they said, listen, we really like what you're doing, but if you're going to want to work with us, like, you cannot be called Casaroo. Here's a bunch of names we think are way better. And we really like the buzz idea, although condos often don't really have door buzzers. So, but the idea of buzz and this bee going around and getting honey or getting information and bringing it back to the hive was really, we thought was really nice. So we really, one of the options was BuzzBuzzHome.
That's a good name.
Go with it.
A good story.
Yeah.
So we have a question we ask all our speakers, and that is to recommend a book that is about business or leadership or process. What would be your book?
The book that I want to recommend is not your typical business book. Cliff actually loves reading kind of the business books. I'm more into novels. There's a book called Endurance, and it was a story about kind of an adventure to Antarctica that got totally derailed, and the team had to endure to make it to safety. And I mean, that is the story of a startup or a new business. Like, you need endurance. Like you have to be able to just keep fighting along the way and figuring out how to make things happen. You might be you have to be a master of all trades early on. You have to, like, it is an endurance. It is a crazy, I've never run a marathon, but I think it's like a crazy marathon or triathlon, whatever. You just have to keep on pushing through and believe in what you're doing. And so there's a lot about endurance that I really like. And I think it kind of empowered me when I was reading it to really, I think I was reading it probably around the time that we were going through what I mentioned at Daypack. So it was a really powerful book for me at the time. I'm reading a book right now called Wild. It's about a woman, Cheryl Strayed, whose mother, I don't really won't want to go into all the details about the book, but it's kind of similar to Endurance. It's about this lady who's hiking across the Pacific West Trails. And it's kind of similar to Endurance. I mean, it's got some amazing stories about being alone and figuring things out on your own and pushing forward and dealing with issues from your past and mentally staying focused. So I'm really enjoying that one right now. I haven't finished it, so I can't really recommend it yet, but it's an excellent one.
I am smiling because you're in great company, because Steve Diamond chose the same book, Endurance, on our first webinar. So I have no choice but going and buying this book now.